Let's do one more, expressiveness. This image I already processed, but I'm going to undo it and kind of say, well, how do we go from here to here? This photograph, when someone sets a hat and a ladder in this empty warehouse in New York, you're like, oh, I got to take a picture of that. But then how do I get it somewhere where it's not just blah, you know, and all that? So pretty simple process, R key crop. I'm encouraging you guys to experiment with crop. The best way to I think improve photography is to sort of be mindful and aware of what you're doing as you do it. And so part of what I'm trying to encourage and rally here. So as I'm cropping, I'm like, well, why square? Not just because I'm going to post it on Instagram, but why is this working more for me? And I think part of that is there's a lot of people who say if your photographs aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And I've come to believe that's true. And in portraiture, I think I've taken it too far, that I used to stand back in portraits, and then now I get closer and closer and closer, and then I got too close, and so now I have to scoot back. But it wasn't about proximity, it was about connection. And what happened even with the ladder is I saw it, and I was like, oh, there's a ladder. It's an other. It's separate from me. And so I took it. But what I needed to do was like get to know it, like shake its hand, take a portrait of it, say like, well, what are you? You know, here you are, hat on a ladder. Why does this interest me? And my exposure was off, you know, so I didn't give it the time. So again, giving it that time to do that. All right, let's keep going here, and we'll do exposure, and we're gonna do some contrast, just the usual workflow. Not to belittle it, right? Because all these things are important. And then when it comes to color toning, so many tools at our disposal. One of them, which I want to highlight, is split toning. I'm jumping to split toning quickly by a shortcut, and I got it wrong, which is fine, because you just press Command key and then a number. And here I'm just pressing these number keys. I'm going Command 4, gets me to split toning. That's on a Mac. On Windows, that's Control 4. Now, the thing with split toning that I think a lot of people overlook is that they are trying to find their hue, and so they bring up their saturation slider, and they're like, oh yeah, I want yellow highlights. And then they bring this down. There's a quicker way, right? And the quicker way is to hold down the Option key. The Option key, as you guys know, is the key that says do something different. Hold down Option on Mac, Alt on Windows, and then you drag your slider. When you Option click and drag, it gives it to you at 100. And so that's how you find the spot, right? So I Option click and drag and say if I want blue, not purple, I can find the sweet spot. Or if I want yellow and not green or orange, I can find the sweet spot. Let go, and then of course bring up your saturation to add the value. The other side of the equation too, and this one maybe I'll go blue just to try that out. And I'll find the blue, holding down Option or Alt, clicking and dragging, and then bring up my saturation slider and whatnot. Once you add color, it's affecting contrast and affecting the overall mood. So you almost always have to go back to the basic. I'm not done with that. So Command 1 on a Mac, Control 1 on Windows. The image still seems like it's a little bit kind of dull, and it needs I don't know, a little more brightness to it and contrast. And so I'm just working that out after I've done some of my color working. We could also do a little bit maybe with our temperature. All right, so anyway, for me, it's this expressiveness, this nostalgic idea. I'm not going for, I'm not even just using this color palette because, I don't know, it's there, because I like to convey the mood. It's like how I want to communicate something with this image. All right, so there's an example, having fun with color. Let's do another one. This one's going to be more complex. Any questions as I'm going forward? And also, how's my speed on these type of topics? Speed doing okay for you guys out there? Great. Any questions? Are we good?
I just like that some folks were commenting on their answer to when is a photo done.
Yeah, let's hear that.
When is I'm done when I walk away for a few minutes and come back and say, wow. It's a good one.
That is. Mine is when I walk away and come back and I'm not embarrassed. Because for me, I come back, I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? Because you get carried away. At least I do.
So on a similar vein, W.N. Eagle, you're done when you are satisfied to the point when you can bear to hear any criticism. Yes. Yeah. And having taught in the classroom for years, the other part of it, I think, as well as, you know, that's a profound statement, actually, but is when you can put your name on it. What my students would do is they would say, well, can I turn in these images, but will you not say they're mine? And I would say, no. You know, you have, or can I not stand up in front of class when you show those? I'm like, no, you got to like own it. You know, this is your work. And so doing that, and I think online we're a little bit anonymous,
But imagine if it's like your good friends or your mentors are there, you know, and what maybe some of my mentors would say of that hat one is, Chris, you kind of went hipster too much on that one. And so maybe I need to listen to that voice. Maybe I need to scale the color back a little bit. That would have been a stronger, just like in writing, right? In writing, there's different types of language that you can use. Some of it's a little bit easy. And what they would say is, well, take out all those easy words and rewrite it. Often beginner writers will use curse words to try to convey intensity. And what the writing and teacher always says is, okay, take out every curse word. Don't ever use that, but that same sentiment. And so trying to find that spot, right? Anyway, let's go back to this. Fun conversation. It's all part of it. Here we are in New York again, an old abandoned kind of house in Brooklyn, of all places. And what I want to do with this one is some work on color and tone. So Lightroom's a great place to start and finish images. So with this one, you know that I like brightness. I like a little bit of contrast. I like to bring up my shadows. The reason I'm saying like is to try to empower you to get to use these tools in a way that you like. But what's happening to me with this image is it looks like digital capture and it's not very imaginative. It just sort of looks like a picture. And I want it to have feeling. And so a lot of what I'm after, another thread for me, is feeling. It's savoring, right? And so I'm going to start to do this one. We could do some stuff here in Lightroom, some retouching or some more work on skin, but I'm going to jump to Photoshop just to get some time over there. Command is a big shortcut, E for edit. So I press Command E to edit in Photoshop. And then I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this picture and do some basic cleanup work. I have one friend who's a good retoucher, and he always says you have to do kind of your cleanup and prep work before you get to the fun stuff. And so I'm always trying to remember that. It's sort of like when you paint a house, you have to like tape everything off, put down the drop cloths. And it isn't necessarily fun, like color is fun, but I'm gonna do that. And I'm gonna call this layer R1 for retouching one, J key to select one of my healing tools. You could also click on it. And then if you press Shift J, you get to go through all the set of your tools. And I'm looking for the tool, which is the Band-Aid without the little icon next to it, the healing brush. With the healing brush, we have brush size above, and I'm gonna make the brush a little bigger, or maybe I will tap, maybe I will tap my bracket key and make my brush bigger. And I wanna make sure I'm sampling all layers, and because what that's gonna give me the ability to do is to go through this image, set a source area, hang on, let me grab my Wacom stylus here, and set a source area and just look to try to bring down some of the wrinkles. And with this kind of an image, and with like a lot of demos, what I tend to like to do, which for some people I imagine works, some people wish there was more, is I tend to get going in a direction and not totally finish the image. Otherwise, this whole session would just be on this one image. And you'd be like, okay, there goes Chris again. Oh look, he got a little teeny dot and he fixed that little dot. And then there's the tattoo. This tattoo is interesting. That's why she's wearing the sleeves, cover up her arm tattoos. But whenever you have a line, a hard line, when you use this tool, if you can just get that line right where it was and then go over it, you can fix those issues right on the edge there, like that. All right, so not gonna do a ton more with that, except just a little bit to say that if I'm gonna go for this type of a look, which has this feeling in it, those cleanup steps are essential. Are there more wrinkles we could get rid of? Sure. We got rid of a handful of them. We can kind of see them there on their separate layer, which is nice to do that. The arm also doesn't look very good, so I'm going to do some little bit of cloning, to heal that up. The healing brush is amazing. It's a really strong tool, but I find sometimes it betrays you, especially on areas of contrast. Clone stamp saves that. All right, enough detail work. Let's get to some goods. Let's get to working on this. This image, the whole point of it, what I want to do is talk about color and tone. So I've done my little retouching work, and I'm going to do some color and tone stuff. Black and white adjustment. A phenomenal way to get interesting color and tone is black and white on the photographer's favorite blending mode, which is soft light. So I take this black and white adjustment layer, I'm going to throw it down to soft light. Two ways to do that. We go to the pull down menu and choose soft light, or we could also press our shortcut, which is you select another tool, like the Move tool, anything besides a brush tool, and press Shift Option F on a Mac, Shift Alt F on Windows. And why is this a fun one to use? What's fun about it is what soft light does is it blends things together with contrast. So for example, if I take a solid color, albeit a hideous color, and I change the blending mode to soft light, we can see through that color to the underlying content. So all of a sudden, we have a color shift in an image, which this is a great way to add color effects. And we can see these little subtle color shifts that we have here, but they're done not just like sitting on top of, but blending into the image. So with our black and white, that's giving us this muted contrast, and then also we have our controls. So I talked a little bit about skin and how I wanted that skin to be a little bit whiter and a little bit more porcelain. You can see how I'm changing the brightness of that. We also have our blue in the background over there, which we can modify. With a lot of adjustments, we have to see them through, commit to them, and keep going. The image isn't quite there, and this is a little bit too strong, so I'm going to take it back just a touch. Next, I'm going to go to my hue saturation adjustment, and I'm going to create, I think, 8 adjustments or so. And here I'm just going to drop saturation down all over the board. So I'm just dropping out color. And I always feel like taking color out is a way of sort of turning volume down. You're just like, okay, it's getting a little more quiet. And then I'm going to do curves. Click on curves, and what I want to do is bring some light into the face. So I'm brightening up the midpoint here, just adding brightness everywhere. In the mask tab, we'll invert that. Grab our brush, B key for that one, grab white. I want a nice soft edge brush, so 0 hardness, a little bit smaller there, and make it a little bit bigger. And I'll tap a key to change my opacity. Number keys, when you have the brush tool active, changes opacity, so I go to 3 for 30%. What I'm looking to do is just brighten this area up, because for me it's always so much about the person and the face, and I'm looking to bring in some light into these areas. You know, as a side note, I have one colleague of mine, he's a nature photographer of all things, and he uses this technique, but he almost always paints figure 8s in his photographs. It's really interesting, and you wouldn't know it, but then if you see it, you're like, whoa. So his light is always kind of going like this. It's crazy. You would think that's the worst idea in the world until you saw his work. I don't know how he does it. I can't do it. With the mask, we want to add some feather to that. That softens the edges, hides our brush strokes, even using a Wacom tablet. If you aren't using a Wacom tablet, that might go even a little bit higher. All right, well, let's keep going with this one. I'm going to do another black and white adjustment layer. And on this black and white adjustment layer, I'm going to change the blending mode to luminosity. Shortcut for that, Shift-Option-Y or Shift-Alt-Y. And what that does is it just gives us the ability to control brightness, and it's not really changing contrast like it did before. And so this is a neat way if you want to have access to this. Kind of like the class I did before, if you saw the black and white one, where we looked at how do we change brightness values. This is just brightness values, but now we're using it in color. And what that means is the luminosity blending mode says try to just affect brightness and try to ignore color. That's impossible to separate the two, but it's doing some of that for me. So it's giving me, again, allowing me to craft a little bit of a look on the skin tone. And I want to brighten up a little bit more over here on the arm, too. All right. Okay, we're getting close, getting closer, getting closer. All right, next, click on curves. And with curves, I'm going to do an old-fashioned S-curve. Occasionally you'll hear people say, oh, S-curves, they're not that great. But they're fun ways to just add a little bit of contrast, trying to kind of craft a little bit of that back into the image. I'm going to go to vibrance and saturation, bring up my vibrance and saturation. Why bring up color after you took it down? Because I changed the colors and now I'm changing them in a different way, right? So if I had brought up vibrance without removing color, it would look different. You with me? I don't know how to explain that, but it's a combination. And then last but not least, I'll throw some color balance here. Shadows, I'm going to add some blues to my shadows. Highlights, I'm going to add some yellows to my highlights. And I don't even know how you guys are seeing this or how it looks. But let me show you sort of the before and after, at least, with where we're going. This is what it was. It's like, yeah, it's a photograph. It's like out of the camera. This is getting closer to having mood and expression. And again, for me, I'm really an introvert when I work. So to get it where I really would love it, I almost have to do it in quiet. But at least you're starting to see how we were able to do that. And the crafting of an image, bringing these pieces together to convey something, sometimes as simple, remember that map picture? It's like, hey, all that image needed was some warmth, open up our shadows, little contrast. My gut told me I was done. This image, especially her hat, like look how weird that hat is, you know. And I might change the pink of that hat too, and her dress and this environment. Like you don't know what's happening. She's holding her dress, and so I need to have a little more expressiveness with my color palette to make the image work, at least for me. If you hate this, that would probably be a really good thing. And if you're in your mind like, well, no, what I would do is this, and what about, you know, that? And that's what we have to start trusting and listening to our gut. One of the things that one of my mentors taught me early on was to try to be very careful about how many voices you listen to, and to try to not go to, I don't know if I can say this, but too many workshops. And the reason is what can happen to us is that you're like, well, that person said that person said like add contrast. Well, that person, like Eric Almus, one of my favorite photographers, his first step is always remove contrast. Look at his work. It's mind-blowing. It's amazing. He always starts negative contrast. But I always start a little bit, you know, and so that's okay, you know, and trying to figure out, well, what is it for you? And what's the voice, you know, you want to try on with these images. All right, let's keep going, but I again want you guys to engage with the content a little bit. So, with this content, is there anything that resonates in a positive or a negative way? Meaning like, yeah, like that's kind of interesting. I've never seen someone use 8 adjustment layers to affect color, because I usually use 1 or 2. Or is it, you know, no, I didn't like how he did that. I might have tried this. That's fine, and maybe even good. So ask your neighbor anything that resonates. You could also ask them, is there anything you learned? But I want to try to get to resonate, to gut, and go for it.
We'll check in with the chat rooms as well, so give us yours.
All right. Based on the conversation, which is fine, it's harder to talk about that stuff, isn't it? But that's a good thing. Like to grow as an artist, like Photoshop and Lightroom, no offense, they're kind of easy. You know, I mean, it's like, well, okay, you have sliders, and you can kind of figure it out after some time. Granted, I know they're difficult, and there's a lot in there. But the more difficult thing is your voice and your vision and what you want to say. So I have a question, which is out of software for a second. With my students, I'm often asking them, you know, okay, well, what do you want your photography style to be like? What's your thread, kind of, right? And when someone asks you that, it's like, I don't know, you know, and then I would say, well, let's try something on. And one day I asked my class, I said, well, if you had to describe your aspirational style, what you're going for, not what it is, because we all feel like our work isn't good enough. My style is it's not good enough. It's not, you know, what you want it to be. What if you described it via food? And you said, you know, and so one person said, well, yeah, that's easy. I want my photography to be like a souffle. It looks kind of simple from the outside, but it's always full of a surprise. And I was like, that's beautiful. You know, that's something to aspire for. You know, that you're like, you know those images you look at and you're like, oh, and you get it? That's a great description. Another guy, he was from, where is he from? Iceland or something. He said, you know, and he had this accent, it was beautiful. He said, you know, every Christmas Eve my family would have caviar. And it was the one time a year we'd have it. And he said, I want my photography to be like caviar. Not everyone gets it, but the people who are so committed to it. I was like, that's beautiful. You know, he wasn't trying to go broad. He was going narrow and he wants that depth. Anyway, so as you're thinking through your own voice and style and how you use these tools, ask yourself some of those comparative questions, you know, or what weather is, or whatever it is, you know, and sometimes that helps you get closer and then shapes your post-production.